Having made more than $400 million during his career, boxing legend Mike Tyson was able to afford a lavish lifestyle. Buying numerous cars and other luxury items, Tyson, who grew up in poverty, was only 18 when he fought his first professional boxing match. Since then, he began obtaining a vast fortune and gathering some excessive spending habits, such as spending $2.2 million on a 24-karat gold bathtub and buying the same Bentley 4 times over.
How do you think America sees you in the world?
As someone who's just some young kid that comes from not the best social status situation in life, and ran and put his hand through some money and just totally haywire.
Is any of it true?
Not at all. I just like to live the way I want to live. I like to do what I want to do.
One of his most infamous purchases was made in 1989, when he purchased a luxurious mansion in Southington, Ohio for $300,000. The 13,500 square foot estate had 60 acres of land, 5 bedrooms, and lavishly decorated rooms with crystal chandeliers and zebra carpets. It also had an indoor pool that was bigger than some houses. Outside stood tiger cages for his 3 Bengal tigers, which he paid $70,000 each for, and which he previously bragged that he would wrestle and spar before fights. The world heavyweight champion moved into the mansion because it was close to the Orwell, Ohio training facility of boxing promoter Don King. Tyson was at the top of the boxing world from the mid-'80s into the '90s, earning the nickname Iron Mike after the match with Michael Spinks, who he knocked out in the first round, and throughout those years, it's fair to say the champ lived in high style.
He was known for throwing crazy parties at the mansion, where he would fly people in from all over the country to attend them.
Although he was living large while smashing people in the ring, his life began to spiral out of control at the turn of the decade. The events that would unfold throughout the 90s in regards to the mansion and the people that came in possession of it after Tyson would lead people to believe it was cursed in some way, leaving it to be abandoned for 10 years. At this point, it's important to point out that Tyson wasn't the first person to own the mansion. It was actually built by a man called Ted Vanelli, who was county commissioner in Ohio at the time. It was later discovered that he was stealing county funds to pay for the estate. When authorities finally caught up with Vanelli and threw him in jail, the mansion was foreclosed, and Tyson was able to buy the mansion at a sheriff's auction. Tyson called it home until March 1992, when he was convicted and sentenced to 6 years in prison for sexual assault. In a famous Larry King interview, Tyson stated he had found Islam while in jail and that he was making changes to reform himself.
No, I just always had a great deal of belief. I was very confused with God because I was in a world where everything was material to me. So if I didn't see God, I couldn't believe. How could I actually believe God? I was almost in the same mentality as the drug dealer. His God was money. His God was what he believed in, the bullet, the gun. Not that I believed in killing and shooting, but I believed more like finance and what the finance could bring you.
He was released 3 years after his sentence, but in 1998, Tyson was convicted again, this time for assaulting 2 motorists, and he was sentenced to a year in prison.
When you have money, you believe that you're invincible, you can't be hurt, you live forever. But when God's ready to take you, you could be a billionaire or whatever, and then you say, I can't die, I have so much, and God says, come with me. You gotta be all right, just come with me. It really doesn't mean anything. All I can say, like money, my house, my cars, everything I own is not my biggest asset. My biggest asset is me, and I could live without all that.
When he got out, he started to struggle financially and was forced to sell the mansion. He sold it in 1999 for $1.3 million to a TV infomercial mogul named Paul Monet. Monet owned the home for over a decade. He kept all of Tyson's furniture and decor, but he strangely never lived in it. This was because he had ulterior motives behind buying the famous mansion. This was to carry out a money laundering scheme to sell a 43-karat diamond called the Golden Eye, and set the price of the house at $20 million as a sort of package deal. He ended up getting caught by an FBI agent who was posing as an agent of a drug cartel leader, and this put Monet in federal prison for 12.5 years. This left the mansion abandoned for 5 years until someone called Moneypenny 220 tried to sell it on eBay in 2005 for $3.5 million, but it didn't sell and it went into foreclosure. It wasn't until 2010 that a millionaire health club entrepreneur named Ron Helmengard bought the property for just $600,000 to build a healthcare club there. He had a difficult time breaking the stigma attached to the history of the property. Many trespassers would break in and take pictures and graffiti the walls, so he had to have security guarding the property 24/7. In 2015, he gave up on trying to build a health club and donated it to a small church with 200 members called the Living Word Sanctuary Church.
The renovation of Mike Tyson's former mansion is almost finished, and much of the work done by church members. Brandon Simmons gives us an exclusive look inside.
The renovation taking place here was always God's plan, according to Pastor Nick DiGiacomo. Sitting on 60 acres in Southington, a mansion once owned by one of boxing's all-time greats. It had been abandoned for a decade. That's when congregants started working to turn Tyson's house into God's house.
Their pastor says they will embrace its colorful history.
Someone comes here for that very reason, just to check it out. They're going to check out and hear the Word of God.
The grand mansion of Tyson's heyday has now been converted into a place of worship. It opened its doors in 2019, and the swimming pool has now been turned into a sanctuary. Tyson's tiger cages were demolished to make way for a pavilion. The only thing which was preserved was the basketball courts that's a part of the youth center.
I was a savage, and no doubt about it. I want everybody to be afraid of me. Now I want everybody to love me. Ain't that a trip? Mm-hmm. You're not gonna be 22 for long. Life go back a flick of an eye. You may be a minister. You never know. Life changes us. We're born, and then something happens, and then we meet God. Life is just a flicker. Okay.
It's ironic that a home which seemed to attract nothing but bad energy to where it was left abandoned for 10 years was passed over to a place of grace and healing. Tyson's life began to spiral out of control when he lived in the mansion. The same can be said for the people who owned it before and after him. As people were speculating that the abandoned mansion was cursed in some way, the new ownership can be seen as a polar opposite, a blessing. The new residents have removed the stigma which tainted the property. And like Tyson did with his own life, they transformed that mansion for the greater good.